So our third panelist today, as I mentioned, would be Lori Hack, but she has called an audible for Josh Brown, who is the regional director. Sorry? No, for Josh. Who is the regional director for Europe. Is that correct? For ORCID? All right. You may be familiar with the ORCID ID system for tracking the activity of individual researchers, and indeed the main goal of ORCID as an organization is to maintain and provide the infrastructure necessary to provide those identifiers over time. So thanks, Josh, for joining us this morning.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting Laurel to speak here today. Don't think of this as a substitution. Think of it as getting two for the price of one. OK, we're going. OK, so ORCID exists to solve the name ambiguity problem in scholarly communications. Names are a mess. How many of you out in the audience today are researchers? If you could have a show of hands. And keep your hand up if you have an ORCID identifier. Fantastic. Brilliant, thank you. OK, so you know what ORCID is for. But the challenge we face is that you've seen, I think Anne's slides show the scale of scholarly communications these days. It's enormous. More and more kinds of outputs are being made open. More and more people are collaborating. More and more people are moving internationally. It's the wonder of modern research, and it's a fantastic thing, but it's very difficult to understand who has done what where, with what, and with whom. So attaching the name unambiguously to the resource, to the article, to the output, to the data is vital. We need to be able to give researchers credit for all of this work, and we need to understand who is doing what around the world. So the idea of ORCID is it's Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier, and the open is really important. We're non-proprietary, we're platform neutral. Anyone can implement ORCID IDs in their system. The registry is free for individuals to use. Anyone can go and get an identifier and then just use it whenever they publish an article or submit a data set to a data center, for two examples. Our data is open, our software is open source, we have open APIs, and we share all the documentation for how to use all of that freely on the web. We work with organizations to connect information. So here's a great example of an affiliation. So you've got the ORCID ID for the researcher, the Ringgold identifier for the institution. Together, that comes out to a verified assertion that's visible on the public web that this researcher works at, in this case, the University of Colorado Boulder. Researchers only have to do two things. It's pretty simple. You register for an ID and you use it. If you're prompted during submitting a manuscript, put your ID in there. Make sure you sign in and integrate your ID in the publication. From there, it can flow out to other information systems. The identifier links you to your publication. It links you to your employer. Funders will want to know about those connections. Future employers, current employers will want to know. So far, since the registry launched just a little bit over 3 years ago in Berlin, I was at that meeting. It was great when we had no identifiers issued. We've now got 1.7 million, which is amazing. And these are individual researchers have been prompted to create an ID, and they've done it. 1.7 million in 3 years is fantastic. And they're connected to papers and data and organizations and other things. So far, we have close to 350 members. I'm particularly pleased that 58% of them are in Europe. That's been an amazing experience. It just means that we do a lot of running around the continent, so it's good fun. But it's a fantastic international organization. We are in every bit of the world now, and we're growing. We continue to grow. And the idea is that by being embedded in more research systems, research information systems can pull this information in automatically. Now, that's what ORCID is, and we want to be embedded in information. Article metadata, data sets, you name it. Whether there's a person doing some research, that should be known. That's what we believe. So how can this actually affect open access, open science? Well, we're part of a family of identifiers for different kinds of information. So you can have DOIs, which could be for articles, they could be for data sets. You've got ISNIs for people. You've got grid IDs or Ringgold IDs for organizations, other author IDs that operate within specific ecosystems or serve particular use cases. And The ORCID registry exists to tie all of these together in a transparent way. So you can go there, you can see what other information is associated with that person and where you can get that information about it. So you can move on to other open platforms from ours to get the authoritative information. So we're working with lots of different parties, but here's a good example of how we do this. So notifications. So an author submits an article to a publisher. They include their ORCID ID. The publisher, on acceptance, can push a notification to the ORCID registry to say that that's been done. If you have a green open access mandate, that's a great time to do that because you could get the author's accepted version then, because they still have it on their hard drive. It's still there. They know where it is. If you ask them a year down the line, that file is gone. They're never going to find it. So the idea is that by connecting the person, the organization, it could be a publisher, it could be an employer, and their works, and making sure that that information flows easily and is accurate, you've got a real keystone for open science. So, a lot of little arrows on this one, but you can see how this works. It's the author submits the manuscript, they hand their ID in. The publisher publishes the article, they accept it. They submit metadata to Crossref to Mint to DOI for that. When Crossref detect that identifier, they can push this information to the ORCID registry. From there, a notification goes out and says, say to the university library, they could say, this author has a new publication out. If you had rights metadata attached to that, you could say this author has a new open access publication out. If you have a profile system, you can see, oh, this is a new publication. We need to go to the publisher website and get the metadata so we can have the full citation. It's all about understanding that this gets done, and it gets done without researchers having to just rekey all of this information in all of these different places. Because a computer somewhere knows that there is new information about this research. They just go straight through the system to the source and pull that information without the researcher having to type it in, copy and paste, whatever. There's an interesting one as publishing in transition, is understanding how the ecosystem is changing. So here's an example of how identifiers working together can help you to do this. This is hypothetical, but this is something that people are actually working on at the moment, trying to think about the ways that this information flow could be made transparent. So you have an ORCID ID for a researcher, an author, who has received funding, and that funder wants that article to be open access. You have the Creative Commons license if the article is CC BY, for instance. You have the Ringgold ID for the organization that they work with. You have the Crossref DOI. So all of this information, and FundRef IDs for funding. Once you know that you can link funding to articles, to people, to journals, all of that together gives you an idea of how much of your information is already open access, how much of it is covered by subscription. If you're paying subscriptions, you want to be able to see how the portfolio you present as a library to your researchers is changing shape. If you're a publisher, it's helpful for this to be open, and you can see how your open access stable of journals or hybrid journals compares to that of other publishers. It's all about opening up science and understanding how all of this works. It's a great service for transparency. So we're really excited to see this being kind of explored as a concept. So all of these ideas are pretty cool. They make life easier. They make information flow more easily. They make it easier to identify the source of the information you're looking for, and hopefully they'll make it more transparent when you want to know if something is open, is accessible, is embargoed, or is coming down the pike. But what they share is they could save a lot of time and money. If you think about how many trained professionals are wasting time retyping the same information in lots of different places, or trying to track down publications so they can check if this complies with a policy, or which policy this complies with, because there are so many different variations in the policy. Make it easier to do it, automate it, make the information flow. It saves a huge amount of time. Researchers can concentrate on researching. Librarians can concentrate on providing information, curating information, providing rich services to researchers. But for this to work, we all have to work together. So we provide identifiers for people. That's a tiny part of the problem. It's a big problem, but overall, open science needs us all to work together. Publishers implementing ORCID IDs in workflows. sharing more rights metadata. Universities exposing more information about their policies, making it easier to find. Making sure that their repositories or their research management systems are using identifiers effectively, pulling this information in across the web without the researchers having to do the work for them. And this is the key thing, they're possible now. The pieces are here. The infrastructure is available. It's just a case of doing it, and everybody has a responsibility to make this enormous research enterprise work better for researchers, for the public good, and for everybody who contributes to this. It makes our lives easier, it makes people's lives better. That's the bottom line. That's why we want to do this. So that's my last slide, but I think it's nice to end on a Clarion call to action. It always really annoys people when you go, you actually have to go away and do this. But it's possible, so why not? Thank you.